You guys are so lucky you get the first sip on camera. Okay, fat ice cube got in the way. No thank you. So good. What is up, you guys? Welcome back to another... Oh my gosh, I almost just did my podcast intro. Mom brain is such a thing. What is up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel. If you guys are new here, my name is Amanda. I am a podcaster, blogger. I cover everything womanhood, wellness, and self-growth. I have a podcast right here. You guys can listen to it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, literally everywhere on the podcasting platforms. I have not made a YouTube video in a really long time. I think since Lennox, my son, was like 2 months old, and he's almost 5 months old. So I'm back. I'm sorry, I've been a little MIA on here. I have been so distracted and focusing on so many other social media platforms. I've been doing my podcast, I've been doing TikTok because for some reason a video of my boyfriend and my son went viral. And of course, as soon as I post my boyfriend on my social medias, he gets famous. And I've been doing this for like 5 years. Nothing yet. Anyway, I've been focusing on TikTok, I've been focusing on Instagram, and it's a lot. Oh, and I'm also hosting a Clubhouse group now. I don't know if you guys have heard of Clubhouse, but it's a really cool new app where you can basically go and talk about whatever you want, and it's just voice, it's just audio. So you don't see anybody, but you can join groups, you can listen to people talk without even speaking, or you can raise your hand to speak. It's really cool. And me and my girlfriends Amelia and Allegra, who are also young mamas, and fun fact, our babies are all literally a week apart, we started a Clubhouse group called Accidental Moms, and we talk on Clubhouse every Wednesday. I'm not going to say a set time because the time kind of changes every week depending on what we have going on, because again, being a young mom, there's a lot of shit going on and it gets hectic over here. So the time kind of changes every single Wednesday, but it's every Wednesday on Clubhouse, Accidental Moms. So yeah, before we get into it, find me on Instagram, Just Mans. Find me on TikTok, just_mans. Find me on Clubhouse. I think I'm Just Mans there too, but Accidental Moms. There's so many apps, I can't keep up with these damn apps anymore. But I'm back on YouTube. I'm wanting to get more into YouTube again because I love the format of YouTube. I love that you guys can see me chatting with you. We can drink coffee together. You can hang out in my room with me, with my salt rock lamp. Sometimes I think being able to see me speak instead of just hearing me speak on the podcast is great and a little bit more digestible for some people. So I'm gonna be sprinkling in a few YouTube videos every now and then. I'm not gonna give you like a set schedule because I'm a mom. I have no idea what the fuck my schedule is. Can I curse on YouTube? Today, I want to chat with you guys about traveling while breastfeeding. So my son is almost 5 months old, like I said, and this past weekend, I took a trip to Nashville, Tennessee to celebrate my girlfriend, Abby, who's getting married. We were there for her bachelorette party. Of course, Nashville, the bachelorette capital of the world, but she actually lives there, so it was just super convenient. When I was preparing to travel, granted I was only going for 4 days, 3 nights. So when I was preparing to travel, I was scouring the internet, like Google searching, YouTube video searching, and I really just couldn't find any good information on traveling while breastfeeding. I found a few, but not anything in detail, in depth, like nitty gritty. I need the details. I need all of them. I need the tea. So that's what I'm gonna give you guys today. I'm gonna give you guys all the tea on traveling while breastfeeding because it is possible. It's possible if you prepare. I was actually supposed to go to Florida for another wedding in January, and I was not prepared to go. There was a lot of things that were happening, and I'll get into it later in this video. But today we're gonna be talking about traveling while breastfeeding, pumping, schedules, and how to make a schedule for pumping. We're gonna be talking about alcohol. If you drink alcohol, I drink alcohol occasionally, and I drank alcohol this weekend for sure. So I wanna get into alcohol while breastfeeding, especially pumping, and kind of debunking some of the myths. Again, I'm not a medical profesh, but I do a lot of research, and I think I've kind of formed my own opinion about it and really just set kind of a rule of thumb for me and me personally. So I'm going to be sharing that with you guys. And I also want to talk about sleep schedules and kind of just how I prepared. So I'm going to be breaking this video down into things that I did before to prepare before I went traveling, and then during the trip, during the extravaganzas. So just keep on watching if this interests you, and I hope you like the video. So I will say the number one thing and the best thing that I've ever done for me and my family and my son, and for being able to travel, was sleep training my son. So sleep training is not for everybody. I'm just gonna put that out up front. And I know that not everybody kind of has the capacity to do it, or you might be watching this video 3 days before you're leaving for a trip, so there's no way in hell you can start sleep training before you go. But if you are somebody who is watching this video before you've even really planned a trip and are just curious about traveling while breastfeeding in the future, I would really, really, really recommend sleep training, and I will link the sleep training below that we did. It is life-changing, and for me, I'm somebody who cannot function off of like 5 to 6 hours of sleep. I need a good 7, 8, 9 hours, and my son has always been a really, really awesome sleeper. At 2.5 months, he was sleeping through the night 7 to 7. Then the 4-month sleep regression came, and let me tell you, it hit us hard. Not only did it hit us hard, we were also getting hit hard by COVID at the same exact time. So we had COVID. This was all like the 1st of January. So we were all like, yeah, 2021, it's gonna be so much better than 2020. Although 2020 was great because my son was born and a lot of good things happened. But we were like, yeah, 2021, new year, got hit with COVID literally the first day of the year. So that happened. And then he went through the 4-month sleep regression literally like in the middle of that. And then he was also transitioning from the swaddle to a sleep sack because he started to roll over. Then he was getting too big for his bassinet, so we moved him to the crib. So there were just a lot of things going on in terms of sleep disruptions for him. Oh, he had COVID too, but he didn't get affected. He maybe like coughed and sneezed for like a day or two, and then he was fine, completely fine, happy, whatever. But we had so much going on, and so there were so many changes going on for him. His sleep was disrupted. But what the 4-month regression looked like for us, because I've watched a lot of other YouTube videos of moms explaining it, and they don't really go into detail of what it looked like for them. What it looked like for us is he was sleeping 7 to 7 before, and then all of a sudden he was waking up 3 times a night. And when I say he was waking up 3 times a night, he was waking up from his bassinet hungry, so I would feed him, and then I'd put him back down. Then he would wake up an hour later, and I would try and feed him, and he would fall asleep. I'd put him back in his bassinet. As soon as I put him in his bassinet, wailed, crying, did not want to be put down. Then we'd have to get the snuggle me, put it in bed with us. He would have to sleep next to us. I would have to like hold his hand or touch him to like have him be settled and go to bed. It's a whole mess. And it was such a mess at the time, and I was getting no sleep because within those 3 periods of wake-ups in the middle of the night, it was probably a span of like 2 weeks, he had one wake up where he'd be up for like 2 hours straight. So he'd wake up probably at like 1, and then he'd wake up at 3 and be up till 5. And that was not okay for your girl, because I got shit to do. And I need my sleep. I can't function when I don't sleep. I get really massive anxiety, like through the roof, and I needed to do something about it. So that is the first thing I will say about traveling. When he was going through the 4-month regression, I was supposed to be going to a wedding in Florida. I unfortunately had to be like, I can't go because I was not sleeping. I was not in a good headspace. Lennox was completely out of whack. He had no idea how to sleep, and I wasn't about to change that with a time change. I wasn't gonna change up his whole environment and his whole world when like he wasn't even able to fall asleep in his bassinet, which he's been sleeping in for his whole life. I wasn't gonna like make it harder on him, and I wasn't in a good headspace. I slept probably 4 to 6 hours every single night, broken up. Not okay. So the reason I recommend sleep training or making sure your baby's at least kind of on a consistent sleep schedule before you go and travel is because it makes your life a lot easier. Not only are you going to be way more well rested and able to travel just from a mental health aspect, but also whoever's watching your baby back home, whether it's your partner or grandparents or a babysitter, they're going to be able to really predict what your baby is going to do at night, and it's going to make you feel a lot better at night. It's going to give you a lot more peace of mind. I know for me, there was no way in hell I was going to leave and go to a bachelorette party if my son was not sleeping, or I knew he was going to give my partner a hard time in the middle of the night. So I'm so happy that we got him transferred to his crib, being able to fall asleep alone, like independently. I literally lay him down in his crib awake and he puts himself to sleep now. We were able to do that before I left, and so I was able to make a schedule and just let my boyfriend take over, instead of my boyfriend being like, oh my gosh, I have no idea what he's gonna do at night, and me being like, I don't know either. Sayonara, have a good time, you know? So sleep training, I will say, is the number one thing that really prepared me to go and travel alone. However, I will say, if you are in a situation where your baby's not sleep trained and you're leaving in like 3 days or a week, don't worry about sleep training. You really want to have a solid 2 to 3 weeks of being home to sleep train your child, because that's what's going to form the habit. So don't worry about it if you don't have the time. I will just say that really helped me. One of the first questions and the most asked question that I received on Instagram while I was traveling, because I made a highlights on my Instagram of traveling while breastfeeding. So if you're watching this video and you want to see visuals of me breastfeeding, and not, I almost said breastfeeding in public. What? I need to get through this coffee. If you want to see visuals of how I made breastfeeding work while traveling, I'll put some here, but you can go to my Instagram, which is justmans, and you can check out the highlight, traveling while breastfeeding. But the most common question I received was, how did I build up my milk stash before I left? So I'm super thankful that I have a really awesome milk supply. I've never had problems with it. I've had people be like, you overproduce, but I don't really know if I overproduce. I probably pump anywhere between 4 to 9 ounces every single time that I pump, and I will say it does dwindle at night. So like at night I'll probably pump like 3 to 4 ounces, but if I'm pumping in the morning, it's anywhere from like 4 to 9 ounces. So I was able to really build up my milk stash by making sure that I started building it 3 weeks in advance. So I started pumping twice a day for 3 weeks leading up to the day that I was supposed to leave. So what that looked like was, I pumped in the morning during Lennox's first nap, and then I pumped when he went to bed. So like when I put him down for bed, and then when I got in bed around like 8:30. And what I did was I bagged my milk in 5 ounces or 6 ounces. So say I pumped 4 ounces at night. I kept that bottle in the fridge because milk lasts in the fridge for 3 to 8 days. I kept that bottle in the fridge overnight, and then the next day I would pump in the morning, and then I would combine the milk that I pumped the night before with the milk that I pumped this morning until it reached 6 ounces, and then I would bag 6 ounces and put it in the freezer. So I was able to save up around 100 ounces before I left to go to Nashville, which was super nice. And I will say the reason I saved up 100 ounces was because I kind of did the math in terms of how much I would expect Lennox to eat in a day. So again, I left on a Thursday in the middle of the day, and I came back on a Sunday morning. So that's basically Friday, Saturday full days, and then Thursday and Sunday half days. So I made sure that I had enough milk for a full 3 days. And I probably had a little bit more than that. So I just went online and said, how much does an average 4-month-old eat in a day, or how much do they need to eat in a day? And they say anywhere from 25 to 32 ounces is what a 4.5-month-old is going to eat in a day, an average. This can vary, but I did the math too about how many times a day he eats. So he eats anywhere from like 5 to 7 times a day. And so I was kind of doing the math of like, okay, if he's eating at most 32 ounces, I'm going to divide that by 7 and make sure I have enough. So I just bagged 5 ounces, and then my boyfriend fed him 5 ounces at every feed, and it probably came out to like 5 to 6 feeds, which is 30 or 35 ounces. I don't think he was eating 35 ounces, so I think it was only 5 feeds a day. So yeah, my next tip would be to make sure that you are building a milk stash before you leave, so that your baby can still be fed from your breast milk while you're gone. And the easiest way to do that is to really just pump beforehand. And if you don't produce as much as I did, I'd probably start building like a month before, or just, you know, listening to your body and seeing how your body produces, and you'll be able to make that assumption for yourself in terms of like how far in advance you need to prepare. But yeah, definitely build your milk stash at least 3 weeks in advance, and I would definitely go online in terms of how much your baby needs to eat. So if you have a 6-month-old, it's probably going to look a lot different in terms of how much milk they need during the day. So definitely do the math, do the research, calculate how much they need to eat per day, and line that up with how many days you're going to be gone, and then make sure you have that amount in the freezer ready to go while you're gone. Okay, the next thing that I did that was super clutch was I made sure that my pumps were effective before I left for the trip, because God forbid I got on the plane and I went to go pump, or I got to the hotel and I went to put on my electric pump and it didn't work. I would be devastated, and I would probably not have a good time because I wouldn't be able to pump, and my boobs would be rock solid, like ready to burst, like in the neighbor's scene where she just, that would have been me. So I tested my pumps. I made sure that they worked. I have the Medela manual hand pump, and then I have the Medela Freestyle Flex pump. I'm gonna leave a blog post that I wrote in the show notes because it has the links to both of these pumps, and I love them. I got a pump for my insurance. It was the Freeme. I didn't love it. It broke after like 5 uses, and I don't think that's normal. Like, I don't think it would have done that. I don't know what I did, but I think it probably was just a fluke, but I didn't love it to begin with. So I'm really, really loving the Medela, and I recommend them to everybody. So I do the Medela electric pump, which is the Freestyle Flex, and then the manual one. However, when I was prepping to go and I was pumping two times a day for 3 weeks, I was pretty much only using the electric pump because I was pumping during his nap time when I needed to get work done. So I didn't have time to sit there and just like manual pump. I wanted to type away and have that shit just go into town on my boobs. So before I left, I made sure that I really tested my manual pump so that it still worked, because I found, and I'll talk about this too, I found when I was traveling, the manual pump was really nice to have on the go. So like, I'd bring it to dinners, I brought it to a drag show. I literally pumped in the middle of a drag show in a booth while they were singing Lizzo and doing like death drops. I was over there like, yes, queen. Anyway, the Medela manual hand pump was super nice to have on the go, but when I was prepping, I was using the electric pump a lot, so I really had to make sure that that one still worked. I didn't do this, but I wish I did this. I got to Nashville and I was like, oh my gosh, what am I gonna do with my milk? Because originally I was just planning on pumping and dumping, because any traveling while breastfeeding, sorry, my volume was up. Any traveling while breastfeeding blog post or YouTube video that you watch or read will say, do you really need to bring the milk home? Like, do you have to save that milk for some reason? If you do, great, there's ways you can do that. But if you don't have to bring that milk home, like if you really have no reason to bring it home, then you just dump, because it saves you hassle. So that's what I was originally planning on doing, and that's what I ended up doing. However, when I got there, I would wake up in the morning and I'd pump 9 ounces and I'd be like, this is perfectly good milk. I feel so bad just wasting it, like just dumping it down the drain. And I wish I did a lot of preparation beforehand in terms of what I could do with it, because I ended up posting on social media being like, hey, are there any moms in need who need donor milk? And I didn't get any luck there. And then I called the Nashville Breast Milk Donor Bank, and they basically were totally cool and had the ability to take my breast milk. However, to donate your breast milk, you have to be pre-approved. So I would have had to go through like a blood draw, just like health records, because obviously they want to make sure your milk is good and there's nothing in there that's going to harm a preemie baby that they give it to. Because what a lot of the milk banks do is they give them to the local hospitals for the babies in the NICU and the preemie babies. So I didn't have the time to do a blood draw and get approved, because I called on a Friday and the guy there was super nice, but he was like, listen, you probably should have done this like a week ago in order for us to take your milk, because you have to get a blood draw. It's gonna take 3 to 4 days to get approved. Like, we're not gonna be able to take your milk. I'm so sorry. He's like, but thank you so much for inquiring. And he's like, here's what you can do. When you get back to Colorado, there's milk banks there. You can get approved with them. You can get registered with them, so that when you are traveling, you can go to the milk banks and be like, hey, I'm already pre-approved, whatever, and here's my milk. So I don't know if that works for every single milk bank. I'm not like super well versed in all of them, but I will leave the one that I called in the show notes in Nashville down below. They were super nice, and he told me that I could just come back here. I could get approved for donating my milk here to some of the milk banks, and then when I traveled, I would already have my like records and me in the system, so I could just donate my milk without having to be approved. I would have already been approved. So I really wish I did that, because I probably had at least 20 ounces like bagged and freezed, because I was actually at an Airbnb and then at my girlfriend's house, so I was able to freeze them. The other milk, I was out and about, so I just dumped down the drain because I didn't have any plastic bags. Also, I wasn't going to keep it, so I probably had like 25 ounces bagged and freezed, and I was going to try and take them home with me on the plane, which is what you can do. You can do this if you really need to bring your milk home. You can get a cooler and you can put your milk in there and literally just travel with it. Apparently TSA like knows that you can bring your breast milk back, like it's not a big deal. So I was going to do that, but I had like a 6 a.m. flight and I didn't have a cooler with me, didn't have a car to get to a cooler, so I was just like, you know, this time I'm gonna dump it. Next time I'm going to either bring a cooler to bring it back, or I'm going to sign up for approval for the milk donation banks, because I would love to be able to donate my milk to preemie babies who really need it. Okay, let's get into what I did during the trip that really helped me in terms of making sure my milk supply stayed where it needed to be, so that I can come back and breastfeed my child like nothing ever happened. So the first thing I will say is I set kind of a pumping schedule for myself. So I wouldn't say I set exact times. I basically just tried to mimic Lennox's schedule as much as I could. So I knew that Lennox eats anywhere from 5 to 8 times a day. I made sure that I pumped 6 times a day. So I didn't mess around with like, I'm gonna pump 5 times one day and 8 times the next. No, I just said I'm gonna pump 6 times a day. Or I'm going to pump every 2 to 3 hours, which is when he eats. So I will say another thing about the sleep training that made this super convenient is that I didn't have to wake up in the middle of the night to pump, because Lennox doesn't eat in the middle of the night anymore. So when he was going through the 4-month regression, he was waking up in the middle of the night to nurse. He didn't need to do that anymore based on his weight, and obviously based on his older sleeping patterns from 2.5 months to 3.5 months, he was not waking up to eat in the middle of the night at all. So I was really lucky that we did the sleep training right before that I left. So he got used to not eating in the middle of the night and doesn't eat in the middle of the night. So I didn't have to wake up in the middle of the night to pump, which was really nice, because we'd go to dinner, we'd go have a few drinks, we'd go out, we'd get home, we'd probably go to bed at like 10:30, 11. I didn't want to wake up in 4 hours to pump and then wake up at 7 the next day to like have a full day. That's not fun when you're traveling. You want to be refreshed. So it's another thing about the sleep training. I'm not saying you need to do it, but it was very liberating for me. Another thing that you probably should take into account when you're traveling is the time change. So Nashville's only an hour ahead of Denver. So I got really lucky and I didn't have to really factor the time change in as much as I could. I just literally set it to where it would be in Denver. So if I woke up at 7, but Lennox usually eats at like 7:30, I wasn't gonna pump at 7:30 Nashville time. I was gonna pump at 7:30 Denver time, so I would pump at 8:30 Nashville time, and I would kind of just adjust it to that. I will say though, I was flexible with when I pumped. So for example, I knew that Lennox usually at night will eat at like 5:30 and then 7:30, or he'll eat at like 5 and then 6:30, depending on when he goes to bed. So there's only like an hour to an hour and a half or 2 hours in that time frame from when he eats the next time. So for example, if we were going to dinner at 7 and, well, no, let's say, okay, yeah, if we were going to dinner at 7, I would pump at 5, because it would be 4. So I know that he usually eats around 5, but I was like, okay, well, I can get away with doing it at 4, and then I can pump at 6 right before dinner. That way I'm not like getting to dinner and being like, hey guys, BRB, I gotta go pump in the stall for 15 minutes. So I would kind of fudge the timing a little bit as much as I could. And again, I had a really easy time because it was only an hour time difference. But again, like if I was going to dinner or if I was going out, I would kind of do pumping like right before I was going out so that I can enjoy myself there for a couple hours. So if it was like it's been 2 hours and I'm about to go somewhere, I wasn't gonna wait 3 hours. I was gonna do it then, and then I would wait another 2 to 3 hours. So what I did during the trip again is I pumped and dumped my milk, and again, I wish I donated, but this was also because I was drinking. So there is so much controversy around drinking and breastfeeding, and there's a lot of studies done, not a ton, but like a lot of information you can find on the internet. And a lot of the time, the rule of thumb is like, have a drink while you're feeding your baby because it's not going to pass through the breast milk that fast. But once you have a drink, wait at least 2 hours before you feed your baby again, or before you pump again, because 2 hours after one drink is when the milk is going to be, or the alcohol is going to be out of your milk. So for example, if you have 2 drinks, they say wait 4 hours. So 1 drink, wait 2 hours, and then if you're having 2, it's another 2 hours, so 4 hours. I don't follow this all the time. I'm not saying that I get plastered and then I feed my baby, but if I have 2 drinks within the span of like 2 hours and then my baby's hungry like 2 hours later, I'm gonna feed my baby. I've also heard people say like, if you're sober enough to breastfeed, which I kind of go by too, because you know if like you are intoxicated. And obviously if you're intoxicated, don't feed your baby from your boob because they're gonna get some of that alcohol. But that's how I kind of gauge it. Like I obviously will make sure that I'm like sober, but if I've had 2 drinks and then my baby's hungry 2.5, 3 hours later, I'm gonna feed my child. And the reason I'm telling you guys this is because I have seen so many vloggers and YouTubers like drinking and then breastfeeding in vlogs and not really talking about what they do. And I'm over here like wondering, okay, I'm not being like a police, like you just drank and breastfeed. I'm like, well, what is your rule of thumb there? Because I'm really curious. Like I like to enjoy a drink too, and I would be interested to hear what you do and what kind of like rules you kind of go by when it comes to drinking and breastfeeding. So that's why I'm telling you guys here. I'm not asking for any hate. I'm not going to respond to any hate. I don't really care if you have a different opinion in terms of like, oh my gosh, you shouldn't be doing that. This is what I do, and I'm just sharing it with you guys. So again, if you don't agree with me, that's fine. I'm just sharing what I do. So back to my point about drinking in Nashville, I was obviously having more than like 2 to 3 drinks every single day. So we were going wine tasting one day. So I was drinking wine here and there. And then we went to a drag show. I had like a good 4 drinks within a 5-hour span. So obviously I wasn't going to pump and keep that milk. So this is actually so funny. Again, shit. I don't know if I can curse on YouTube. I'll bleep it out. Anyway, this is so funny. We went to a drag show the last night that I was there, which by the way was my first drag show ever, and it was so fun. I am like, I want to do that. Like I want to go on stage and I want to lip sync to Ariana Grande and I want to look fab as in a cute outfit. What? Like the most fun hobby ever. Anyway, I had to pump. It was like 8:30, which is 7:30 Denver time, and I hadn't pumped yet, and it was my last pump of the night. So I was like, you know what, we're in a booth, we're in a secluded area, I'm with my girlfriends, like no one can see me, it's in between the shows, like I'm just gonna pump. So I pumped and I brought my manual pump, and my girlfriend Amelia, who actually does the Clubhouse group with me, she breastfed her baby for like a couple months or just in the beginning and then switched to formula. But she was like, at the end, one of our friends was like, oh my gosh, Amanda, like, are you pumping? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, what? We were literally having a full-blown conversation, like a deep conversation about our babies. I was sitting there pumping. She had no idea I was pumping. She did not even notice, and she had breastfed. Like, she did not even notice. And that's the thing, like you can be so subtle about it, and that's why I like the manual pump, because you can literally put it like under your shirt like this and just pump, and like no one's gonna know if they're not looking at you, especially in a dark room. So I literally sat there in the drag show with a vodka soda lime crayon in my hand pumping. And it was funny because I didn't want to like take my pump full of milk and like go to the bathroom and dump it out, because it was kind of a far walk and it was in like the middle of everybody, and I totally could have, like there's something wrong with that. Normalize breastfeeding, normalize pumping, but I just like didn't want to. So we had a ton of empty plastic cups sitting on the booth, like the table of the booth. And I literally just poured my milk in there, called it a day. And looking back, it's probably not, that probably is a health hazard in terms of like it's COVID and it was human breast milk and they have to like take that and throw it away. Probably not like the best situation, but it was so funny because I poured my breast milk in a cup and like no one noticed, and then my friend was like, is that your breast milk? And I was like, yeah, sorry. So in terms of where I pumped when I was out in public, when I was traveling in the airports, I had a lot of mamas DM me saying there's breastfeeding pods and pumping pods in airports, in some airports. There's an app called Mama, I'll link it below, that basically tells you where all of these breastfeeding and pumping pods are in the airports. That way you don't have to go to a bathroom and go into a stall to pump. Like you can just go into one of these pods to pump or breastfeed your child, which is super convenient. I didn't know about it, and honestly I didn't have a problem with just going in the bathroom. A lot of the bathrooms had super nice big stalls where I could just set up all my stuff and pump on the toilet, like literally just sit on the toilet and pump, or sit on my luggage and pump. And it was fine because I only pumped for like 10 to 15 minutes each time I pumped. So I did that. I pumped in stalls. A lot of the places we went to for dinner and brunch and breakfast also had one person bathrooms. So I would just go in there and pump for 10 to 15 minutes. And it was super easy. Like it really wasn't a big deal. And again, because I was dumping, it made it really easy too, because I would just bring my purse. It's not this purse, but it's literally the same size in black. I'd bring this and I'd bring my manual pump and just pump, and just put it in there. And then I would pump, dump my milk, wash out my parts, and then put my pump right back into that purse. Or if I was using my electric pump, I would bring my pumping like nursing Medela bag, which is super compact and really easy to bring around everywhere. So yeah, it was just really easy to find places to pump. And again, I pumped in the drag show, like out in public. I'm trying to think where else I pumped. I pumped in Ubers. I pumped in a lot of Ubers. Like we were lucky that we had to get Uber XL, so we had big Ubers and I sat in the back sometimes, and the Ubers like didn't even notice. And even if they did notice, well, actually, I don't even think they would know what I was doing, honestly, because it was a lot of dudes. I don't think they would know, because it was under my shirt like this. Like, it was totally fine. So I pumped in Ubers, I pumped in car rides. I actually did not pump on the plane, what I did was I pumped before I boarded, and then I pumped after. And something I will say about the schedule, so I tried to mimic Lennox's eating schedule as much as I could in terms of times. However, if I was getting on a plane, and all the plane rides I took were at least 2 to 3 hours, I would do it beforehand, just because I didn't really want to pump on the plane or go into the little plane bathroom for 15 minutes and take it up for 15 minutes and pump. Like the planes were small too, so it was two person on each side. I didn't want to just like sit there out in public and like pump when the person was literally like all up on my girl. I didn't want to do that, so I just pumped before and I pumped after, and it ended up being fine because the timing lined up. But say it was like I had pumped 2 hours before and I knew I was getting on the plane and I could wait an hour to pump, but I was like, I want to pump before, I would just pump after that 2 hours and call it a day. And then right when I landed, I would get my luggage and I would go into a stall and pump. And it worked. It was totally fine. Another reason that I would kind of fudge the schedules a little bit was if I woke up engorged. I don't know what this means or like why this happens, but I noticed that if I have a night of drinking and I don't pump after 8:30 p.m. until like I wake up the next day, I am so engorged. So I remember the last day, I woke up at like 5:45 to head to the airport for my 8 a.m. flight. And I was so engorged, and obviously that was 4:45 in the morning Denver time, but I was so engorged, I was like, I'm pumping. And it ended up being fine, because when I came back, I was maybe engorged when I woke up for like 2 days after I came back, and then I was totally fine, regulated again. But yeah, I will say, if you wake up engorged, or you're engorged for some other reason during the trip and doesn't line up with what time it is back home in terms of when your baby usually eats, because you really don't want to fudge the schedule too much to where you're telling your boobs like, okay, it's 4:40 a.m. and I'm making milk, like we got to make milk at 4:45 a.m. You don't want that to happen if your baby's not waking up. So if you feel engorged and you don't want to fully pump, you can always hand express in the bathroom or in the shower. Like, it really helps to kind of relieve your boobs a little bit, and it's not going to tell your milk like, hey, it's not going to tell your milk supply like, hey, we need to make more milk. Like, it's just going to relieve you a little bit. So don't sleep on hand expressing. It really helps if you're engorged. I think those are all of the tips that I want to relay to you guys. I think that's pretty much covers it all. I will say that was my first time away from my baby for more than a night, and especially like that was the first time I've ever been in a different state than Lennox, and he was 4.5 months old. And I know a lot of people are like, I didn't go anywhere for the first year, or I didn't go anywhere for the first 8 months. Like, a lot of you will wait till their babies are older, and that's fine. Like, do whatever feels good for you. I will say, before I got on the flight and before I landed in Nashville, I was so freaking anxious, like so anxious, feeling like I was gonna pass out, like crying, like very emotional. And it wasn't necessarily because I didn't want to go. Like, I wanted to go and I wanted to have a good time. I just was like anxious. I was scared. I was scared of getting on the plane. I was scared of flying. I was scared of like being in a completely different state. Once I did it though, oh my gosh, I felt so great. It was nice to just be a friend and be a woman and be a person and be an individual instead of a mom for like 3 days. And I don't want to say I needed it, because a lot of people like to be like, oh, you need a break. Like, this is the perfect break. Like, you needed this trip. Like, I didn't need it, but it was nice. Like, it was so nice to just kind of have a break. But I think the good thing that I did, and I'm not here to like toot my own horn, I'm just here to like encourage new moms, that the thing that I really told myself when I had my baby was, I am a person. Like, I'm a person first. I am a woman first. I have my own dreams. I have my own passions. I have my own goals. And just because I have a baby, I'm not going to turn my back on that. I'm not going to lose myself. And it's hard. Like, I challenged myself. I was like, no, Amanda, you have to prioritize yourself sometimes first too. So I really made sure that when Lennox was born, I was still doing my podcast. I was still taking time to write. I was still waiting 10 minutes in the morning when he was waking up and kind of crying to go outside and take a few breaths if I needed it, or fill up my water and drink water before I went and tended to him. Like, I really pushed myself and challenged myself and made the effort to take time for myself. And I think that's what made it really easy to go and travel. So again, I was an anxious, nervous mess before I left, but once I landed in Nashville, once I got there, I had the best time, and I didn't feel like weird. I didn't feel anxious. I didn't feel stressed. I didn't feel scared. I didn't feel like it was out of the norm. I didn't feel like something was missing, because I remember the first time that I went overnight with Lennox, or went away from Lennox overnight, my parents watched him, I felt so like, oh my gosh, what's going on? Like, I was such in mom mode, but there was nobody to be a mom to, which is so funny. But then when I was in Nashville, I didn't feel that way. I felt like, okay, I'm Amanda, like, I don't need to be a mom right now. It was easy to turn it off. And so I think that really made it easy for me, is just making sure that you really hold on to your independence, and you really know that you are an individual first, and you tend to that individual, so that when you are away from your baby, you know how to act. Because it sounds so silly, but sometimes you don't. Sometimes when you're not with your baby and you're a new mom, you're like, something's missing. I feel like something's not right. It's because you're not with your baby. Like, I really, really just want to hammer home, take time for yourself, make sure you hold on to your independence, because it's going to make it a lot easier to be independent in the future away from your baby. And breastfeeding while traveling is possible. You can still breastfeed and go enjoy yourself. I mean, thank God we have technology, we have pumps, we have everything that makes it super easy for us. So don't say no if you have everything lined up. If you're in the right mental capacity and you have everything lined up, you have caretakers, go on that trip, have the best time ever. And I hope some of my tips helped you and made you feel more prepared. Thank you guys so much for watching. My child is waking up from his nap. Perfect timing. Thank you guys so much for watching. Again, you can always find me over on my podcast, Just Mans the Podcast. Find me on Instagram at Just Mans. You can find me on my blog, justmans.com. You can find me on TikTok, just_mans, and you can find me on Clubhouse now on Wednesdays with Amelia and Allegra for Accidental Moms. That was a mouthful. Please don't create any more apps that I have to have a presence on. Thank you very much.